Hi, how are you? Well, thanks. Listen, I know we don't have an appointment. I know you guys are busy, but we would love if someone could just leave a message for lead of global product policy and active channels specialist. We just wanted to talk with them about their new guidelines.
Security for the building.
Okay.
We're not security for Google.
For Google? Which floor is that?
Well, he's the head of Google security right there. You can talk to him about it.
Oh, okay. We're out there. They have these new guidelines, I know, at YouTube and Google. If they would like to grab some time, I know they're busy, and discuss it. We'll be out here specifically kind of the new hate speech guidelines that people are a little iffy on. My name's Steven Crowder. I was part of a kind of a controversy recently, and just wanted to sit down and talk to them about it.
Do you mind if I see those names one more time?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Head of global product policy, and she's the active channel specialist.
Okay. I cannot promise that they're even here, but
okay.
I can see what I can do.
Okay.
I'll let them know that you're here if they are here.
Okay. If you can come back out and rally us some information whenever you get it, that'd be great. We'll just be right outside.
So for this installment of Change My Mind, I decided to set up shop right outside of Google offices in Austin, Texas, with my half-Asian lawyer Bill Richmond to revisit the topic of hate speech and see if we could get some answers from the powers that be. And we did have some interesting and productive discussions.
It being legal or illegal, I'm not sure, but there definitely is some form of hate speech. That definitely exists, I think.
What would you qualify as harmful speech?
And that's the hard part to define. What is that point where you cross the line for this topic of hate speech?
Setting aside our views, we can at least agree, let's get some clarity from these platforms on what the rules are.
I would also strongly support, others' right to vehemently oppose what you're doing. Sure. By almost any means necessary. Maybe with force. I'm not advocating violence.
You're not, but you said by almost any means necessary.
By almost any means, yeah. Things like that, I fully support combating by any means necessary.
And that means violence.
Yeah.
Even this Austin legend stopped by.
I am ready right now. I came down here. I have joined Obama. I have joined Facebook. I have joined Silicon Valley. I am a woman now. And son of a Steven Crowder is a right-wing extremist that needs to be silenced. Steven Crowder raped me. I don't have any proof, but he did it.
But more on that later. I want to note that something interesting happened here. Not only did nearly everyone find themselves ultimately agreeing with us on the idea of hate speech.
So actually, I agree with you.
I agree with that. People want that to be illegal. It's just someone's opinion.
Government shouldn't regulate it.
No.
Okay.
Definitely not.
Well, I don't think we disagree on a whole lot.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Is there anything there with which you disagree?
Those tech companies are very sleazy.
Yes, they are.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
I agree, especially on the YouTube front.
But more than ever before, people seemed legitimately concerned, and they really pressed us for some answers to these concerning questions. Since I had a legal expert with me, we decided to do something a little different and conduct an impromptu public Q&A session on hate speech in the current state of free speech online.
I have a question, actually.
Hit me.
With all of the opinions that I have on capitalism and everything, I wonder to myself, is it really in the wrong for a private company such as Google or YouTube to shut down a channel that they don't like, because it is a private company? So I wonder that sometimes. I mean, I don't want his channel to get shut down, but I also believe in capitalism, and if they don't like it, then they should, be able to shut it down. So what do you say about that?
Well, that's directly on point with the topic, right? And the question is, I'll say two parts. One, what are the ability of companies to be able to take certain action, and then should they be able to take certain action? So right now, with private companies within their own private businesses and even within their own private platforms, as Steven has always said, they have the ability to make certain restrictions. This is kind of the debate between publishers and platforms. Are you a content neutral provider like a telephone company, right? You're not going to go and say, oh, well, AT&T needs to be shut down, or their executives need to go to jail because someone was planning a murder over a telephone, right? But by the same token, these platforms have come in and decided that they want to actually do more, and they want to regulate the type of speech, which makes them kind of not being just content neutral like a telephone company or something like that. The separate question is, so generally they have the right to be able to say these are the rules. I think for some of you who have followed the Vox issue recently, the big question is not does YouTube have the right to enforce certain rules, it's what are the dang rules, right? And that's something all creators, whether you like conservative views or you're against conservative views, you're pro-LGBT, you have questions about the LGBT movement, if there are no rules, that means they can be enforced against anyone. And that is one of the biggest questions and one that remains unanswered. So the second question is, should they, right? And for that, I would actually say the ACLU is one of the best organizations in terms of setting out why companies like YouTube and Facebook and Twitter should follow First Amendment restrictions. And the reason is because it stops chilling free speech. Like, if you really want to be a company that operates in a democracy, that really values equality and the rights that we have in this country, then you should operate your policies in a way that is more like the First Amendment. And the First Amendment only has, at least how it's been articulated in this country, you only have certain things. The emergency principle. If there's a direct harm, a direct serious incident that's going to happen, something that's immediately going to happen, crying fire in a crowded movie theater when there is no fire, right? Directing someone to go and actually cause harm to someone else, that's already regulated. And we would say that should continue to be regulated by social media platforms or really any company whatsoever. And then the second thing being whether or not it should be viewpoint neutral. Should someone wake up one day and say, you know what, I don't like that guy, can him, bar him from the world, right? He's out. Not because it's actually dangerous, because if it was already dangerous, it would already be banned. Yeah. But to say, this is the view, I find it too offensive, let's shut it down. So on the question of should they, the question is definitely no. They should adopt a policy that is more like the actual free speech structure that we have in this country as opposed to ones that they have in other countries.
So you're saying like defining what the parameters are and then applying them to everyone, not just stations that they find disagreeable.
Exactly. So viewpoint neutrality. I mean, that's the point is it who is going to decide in this day and age what the views are that are offensive or not offensive? I mean, my sheer existence as the product of a interracial marriage is something that, as not too long ago, 50, 60, 70 years ago, was considered offensive, vile, leading to anger, leading to discourse that would create a public nuisance. And so the very laws that we are trying to support right now and say is the right structure are the same laws that allowed for that type of speech or expression to occur, for people to be able to have and say interracial marriage is okay. And some people may still believe that it's not okay. And again, whether or not someone believes that that's right or not, obviously I sit here and I think it's okay. But if someone doesn't think it's okay, it's not agreeing with them to say that they should have the right to be able to say it.
Of course.
Where's the tipping point between interface platforms
Sure.
and a common carrier?
So it becomes the type of action that they're engaged in and whether or not they're actually, taking it. It's a gray scale, it's a continuum. And what seems to be clear is that they're falling more and more towards the sides of publishers who are actually selecting the content as opposed to just carriers who are just letting things happen the way that they're going. And I get it. It's not to say that isn't a model that's worth having, but like Steven said, it's a matter of just being open, right? Be open with the people who are going to devote time and money, who are going to spend money on the platforms in advertising. Be honest with them about what you actually want your platform to be. Part of it might be they just don't actually even know what they want it to be, right? They haven't invested themselves in the time to decide how do we want to approach this, and they've kind of been forced to that question. And when forced to that question recently, they find that none of Steven's videos have violations.
Are there any laws on the books or proposed that would kind of like from an antitrust standpoint say if you're going to be this persuasive, if you're going to be the railroad, you have to let everybody ride?
Well, there's definitely some questions about anti-competitive behavior. Right now, the Department of Justice and the FTC are both conducting separate investigations into different social media and Silicon Valley companies over concerns. Some of those are related to First Amendment issues. Others of those are related to just how they conduct their businesses. And what becomes a question is if you have a company that says, hey, this is how we're going to run our business. We are going to be in the business of publishing data. We're going to get together with other publishers to decide a competitor of ours can no longer do this. Or you decide that channels that compete with, let's say, Steven's channel, you're going to all get together to decide, well, okay, now you can't compete in this marketplace with the other ones because we've decided to employ the guidelines, but then you don't even say what the violations are. That does raise questions of antitrust violations. Are you engaged in an actual fair play that the antitrust statute is what we're trying to have with that type of law?
So it's your point, as long as the companies, the platforms, the publishers are explicit about what they are and whether they will choose content, then they should be able to choose content that they want. platform?
So two separate things there versus the antitrust. They can still be anti-competitive while being express, right? You can still go out and say, I'm going to destroy your business, I'm Mr. Rockefeller, et cetera, and bury you, right? And that still can be anti-competitive. But separately on the question of whether or not creators are actually coming to the platform and users are supporting the platform with their eyes and their subscriptions, is to be honest about how are you actually going to apply it, and or not, because everyone here, whether you're on one side or the other side of the debate, you just want to know, am I supporting a person on their views or they're not? What they continually hide behind is a policy that's, I think, maybe a page and a half long with a bunch of words that are undefined. When asked and pressed for examples, they won't give them. So it becomes a concern.
It's the issue of not understanding the rules and not understanding the guidelines. And the only statement that's been affirmed, that's been put out there, is that there was no violation of guidelines. So what do you do with that? Something else that I think people might want to, anyone here planning on being any kind of a content creator? Does anyone here work in media or want to be doing something like that? Okay, so there you go. So two young examples. So you probably obviously would assume that YouTube is the place to go, right? How old are you? 20 and 18. Okay, so let's be honest, right? YouTube is really the only game in town as far as that. Now, that wasn't always the case. And we've talked about this before while we're talking sort of about antitrust, and I'm not a lawyer, I can defer to Bill after this. But when we started on YouTube, right, for example, my brother and I did a video in 2006. There were other competitors. There was, I think, Vimeo, LiveLeak, but YouTube was the first place to offer to pay people, right? And they said, hey, listen, if you post your videos on our platform, if you use our platform, not necessarily exclusively, but if you make us our primary platform, we will pay you and you'll be able to make a living. And then especially when they were purchased by Google, my brother was one of the first YouTube partners ever, right? Back in 2006 or 2007, whenever they launched the program, he was a part of the launch. And then these competitors folded. Why? Because they couldn't afford to compete. They couldn't pay creators. YouTube had been losing money for a very long time. This is important to know. So they build up their platform, they hit critical mass, and like you said, as a 20-year-old, you probably have never known a world where YouTube wasn't the primary video player. Well, they built that by paying people, by inviting people to create content on their platform under the guise of them being paid and being able to start a business. Other competitors folded. Now YouTube is saying the very same people, the very same content that built our platform and made us the biggest media portal on the web, we're going to change all the rules and get rid of you. So eliminate competition with one practice and then switch it once the competition is eliminated. That's a concern as well for anyone who wants to create content, because now YouTube either buys up other entities or they simply can't compete. And that's maybe something that Bill could speak to more, but that's certainly been my experience and other creators who have been there since the beginning.
Yeah. If you're choosing to start out, you're going to want to know, what are you actually starting out with? And again, the question continually for any creator of any viewpoint, whether your material even has a viewpoint, right? Maybe you're just doing makeup tutorials, right? But you want to know, I'm going to invest time and money on this platform. What am I going to get out of it? What are the rules I'm actually playing by in this particular situation?
Quick heads up, if you enjoyed Change My Mind and you want more of this kind of content, please do support us by joining Mug Club at ladderwithcredit.com/mugclub. $99 annually, $69 for students, veterans, active military. You get a full daily show that you don't see here on YouTube, along with access to the entire Blaze TV catalog.
Turn to the camera and tell them to join Mug, but you're joining Mug Club.
Mud Club. Join Mud Club too.
There you go. There you go. Now you're going to be a commercial. You'll be Employee of the Month. Right after Carlos Mazas.
Nice. Take it easy.
Now, you'll see the questions from the crowd shifted from general curiosity to how we got here in the first place.
Yeah, I just was asking in relation to Vox and, like, I guess traditional left stream media like CNN, MSNBC.
Yeah.
Are they like on the same side? Like, do you think MSNBC, CNN, they are really that interested in like bringing you down like Vox is? Do you think they're just as aggressive? Like, this is a big plan, or Vox is just taking this like way too far with trying to take you down?
Well, it is odd to me that not only, and listen, I don't want to be a martyr with this, but they were the ones who drew first blood, not me. It is odd that the moment this guy cuts together, there's a supercut from 6 years of content completely out of context, that it goes to boom, Vox, Verge, Vice, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, all these major publications. And something interesting too, we found out only after the fact, Washington Post, like right away wrote a piece. They already had done an interview with people from Vox, sent it to me at 6 o'clock at night and said, by the way, you have an hour to answer before the piece goes live. And it was sent through my merch site. Like, there's a contact form on the website for press inquiries. So they were very deliberate in making sure that one side of the story was presented. And I don't know as far as all of media, but listen, Vox is owned by NBC Universal, right? They put in $200 million. They're a $1 billion company. And it's no secret that we do the only conservative late night show, that's available online. And listen, I'm very grateful. This isn't something that we brag about. It's something that I'm grateful for. You know, we have significantly higher numbers than Seth Meyers, and we're approaching the numbers of their people like I think NBC is Jimmy Fallon, or their subsidiary networks. They don't like that, you know. So I can't say all of media at large, but this is definitely a fight between independent content creators and giant media. And when you look at YouTube, what they said is they're now going to push more authoritative news sources in someone's feed. Meaning, let's say you like my videos, or let's say you like someone like, I don't know, Philip DeFranco, whoever it is. They're going to say, hey, instead, we'll suggest CNN or NBC or Washington Post or New York Times. YouTube has said that. They've declared them authoritative. Why are they authoritative sources? Because YouTube declared them so, right? And that's sort of the circular game that occurs with traditional media. It's like, well, this is my reference and it's legitimate. Well, why is it legitimate? Because I'm with the Washington Post and I'm using them as my reference. Okay, but you use them as a yes, that's what makes them legitimate. And that happens a lot. So that's the concern, obviously. You see a concerted effort from NBC and it's all of its subsidiary networks, and who knows where this ends up, but they certainly do want to squash out independent content creators, and not even just political ones. You know, that's how you see they've targeted us, a comedy channel, and now other history channels, you know, and gaming channels. That's a real concern. Yes.
So when it comes to like valid content and knowing what's a legitimate source and what's not nowadays, just a lot of things get published, but you don't really know if it's unbiased or not. What are like some of the sources that you recommend most, like when you're researching things historically or whatnot?
It's a good question. I actually recommend the most biased sources possible. So every morning I read Huffington Post, Salon, Watch Young Turks, Washington Post. I have a subscription, New York Times. I want to see what the left is saying. And then I'll read some conservative news sources. But I would say our show is different from a lot of conservative news shows because we're usually addressing the issues that the mainstream left media focuses on and not what other conservative media tends to focus on. They're kind of two different worlds. There's a bit of a chasm there. So I would encourage everybody, what I just do is set some bookmarks. Here's the thing. It's a myth. The idea of, and I know some people don't necessarily agree with me on this, the idea of once objective journalism, like the era of Walter Cronkite. If you read quotes from Walter Cronkite, he said, I don't think you can be a journalist and not be a liberal. For a portion of time, people thought Walter Cronkite was, my God, an actual journalist, right? There was never a golden era of unbiased journalism. You just weren't able to fact check it. We just believed it. Just like up until the most recent election, Fox News was seen as right, MSNBC was seen as left, and CNN was seen as center. Does anyone believe that CNN is center anymore? No, of course not. And so I think the best that you can do is accept that human beings have an inherent bias and read from at least openly biased sources. So read from sources that you know are coming from a left-wing point of view. Read from sources that you know are coming from a right-wing point of view. Juxtapose them and decide where you line up, as opposed to trying to find a more unbiased, authoritative source, because frankly, and having worked in this industry for a long time, it doesn't exist.
I think one of the things to keep in mind, the first site I check every morning is Slate, which maybe 10 years ago was a little more centric, but has definitely been a decidedly and openly more leftist type platform. But it's the first one I do because it's the one that's challenging the ideas that I already have. And so if you're not willing to have your ideas challenged, if you're not willing to sit in the seat and answer the tough questions, you're not going to be ready to answer them when someone else wants it to be that. When they come to you with your ideas, you won't be ready to. So what I do is I read those articles, I go through and I fact check them myself, right? And that requires more work, it requires more engagement. And sometimes I'll fact check them and I'll type in the topic and I'll look at a couple different news sources. Most of the time you can go look at the actual study, go look at the actual quote. Most of the time they're not even a source, right? So you're having to figure out what those things are, and it's that type of kind of investigation that will give you maybe a little bit of a jaded eye, but I'd say a more critical eye of any source you're looking to, and to get more to that nugget of truth that is out there. And frankly, it's all a little bit gray. It's all a little bit gray. Very rarely is either one of these going to be just spot on, whether it's statistics or facts, and especially what now is counting as journalism is frankly just a lot of opinions.
Right. Yes. So what could regular citizen
I'll so we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So what can regular citizens do to combat like YouTube censoring people and these social media companies like taking voices away?
Sure. Well, I think appreciate a couple before we go to legal issues. You know, I think it's important to delineate between like censorship, which is obviously government, and right now private businesses and platforms. Our issue is not we don't necessarily call it censorship. It is corporate censorship, and that they're capitulating to people who intimidate them. As far as what people can do, I mean, the biggest thing you can do is make your voice heard on these platforms and support the voices that you see is being silenced. So that's why we've created, like, obviously Mug Club. This isn't just a plug. If people want to support us, great. If they don't have to. And then, of course, kind of keep an eye out legally. Right now, there are going to be some pretty big, it seems like, are they lawsuits or are they just legal probes into the antitrust?
So government has a facility and an ability to be able to investigate antitrust. So they're taking their own investigations both through the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. So those are two different parts of Silicon Valley and social media that are being investigated for anti-competitive behavior. Separate and apart from that, you can take action based on not only your actual voice and stuff you do and the stuff you view, but also directly in complaining to these various folks. Obviously we've seen through the Carlos Maza example that YouTube is sitting there listening when they want to listen, and so they'll eventually listen to someone and enough voices that say, hey, we may not like certain things, we may be offended by certain things, but we want all these people to be able to say it. And while you're not required to do it right now as a private company, we're asking that you do it if you want to continue to be the successful company you are.
Yeah. How many people, anyone here, have actually seen some of the rebuttals that we've done to Vox's content by show of hands? Okay, so a few people. So you know that these videos are substantial rebuttals to Vox, and then there's some stuff tossed in that's obviously humor, and sometimes I don't even necessarily plan what we say. But a good example there is I'll watch a Vox video all the way through. And I'll say, well, hold on a second, I know that's not right. And the problem with Vox is they often don't list their sources. So they'll list maybe some kind of, or they'll mention an original source, and then they'll have a quasi-expert on to validate the source that they haven't provided for you. They haven't provided at least a tangible reference. Or they often use charts, sort of based on multiple sources. So the process will be, I have to sit down and watch Vox. And I sit down usually with, I have one guy who's a brilliant researcher who helps me with this. I used to have to do it all by myself. Thank God for Mug Club, because now we can hire more people to help with this. But I'll watch and go, hold on a second, he just made a claim. But there's no source for that claim. Reverse engineer it. Where is he getting this claim? Typically, I'll go to HuffPost, Slate, Salon, liberal sites, type in a similar claim, cross-reference it, find their claim. Often there's no original source there. Go to that source and then see what I believe to be wrong with that source. And if you look at the sources that we try to provide on our show, it'll be, for example, from PubMed, NCBI is the website. We try to avoid using sources that would be from, let's say, like redstate.com or foxnews.com. We'll use those if we're specifically commenting on opinion or commenting on something someone said from that website, but we try to go to the original source material. And with Vox, with all of the money and all of the research, and they accuse us of our content being easier, the fact is the most difficult part is often parsing the non-existent sources from places like Vox. And so it's required us to have a team of people. Everyone here, if you could just give a round of applause to everyone here, everyone working. You have Tim, Manny, you have Bryce, you have Corner Black Garrett. Like the pride-swallowing siege that is our job, that I will never fully tell you about, is trying to reverse engineer sometimes sources that do not exist. And it's something that I recommend everyone do in their daily life. And you don't obviously have to rebut an entire Vox video, but your antenna will go up sometimes when you're reading more leftist sources or sources that challenge you. And sometimes you'll find that you actually agree with them. But I do think that's really important. This idea that, and this is, sorry, now I'm kind of ranting. This doesn't have to do with this, but did you see the New York Times article, The Making of a Radical? Anyone see that article that went up there? Yep. Turns out the guy wasn't actually turned into a radical. He was a conservative who then went to college, became a liberal, and then started dating a Christian conservative afterward and ended up being a liberal in the, anyways, it doesn't matter. It was front page New York Times. My face is right on there as alt-right. Apparently Milton Friedman too. But the point here is the argument they were making, for example, was that YouTube, if you look at YouTube, is all about engagements. And so YouTube radicalizes people by suggesting content for you to watch that might be more radical. But the truth is with YouTube, and how many people here use YouTube? I would argue, and this is one thing, and this is why it's so odd that traditional media is attacking YouTube, right, as clickbait. I will put, for example, this changed my mind, will go up on YouTube. It will get millions of plays. It will go up on Facebook. We'll be lucky to get 50,000 plays. But someone can post a meme, a conservative meme that says, Hillary should be locked up. Click like if you agree, 1 million shares. We found that Facebook and Twitter, these are places that can be manipulated using their algorithms and really apply themselves well to clickbait. But on YouTube, right, everyone here who uses YouTube, it doesn't work. How many times have you ever actually clicked on a video on YouTube with a clickbait title and it's not what you expected? How many times, has that ever happened to any of you? Yeah. What happens the next time you see that channel? You never see it again. YouTube is the opposite of clickbait. You can't cheat an hour-long Change My Mind with people watching for 92%. They either want to watch it or they don't. You can't cheat title, Vox Rebuttal. People either want to watch it or they don't. So it's so odd to me that they are attacking YouTube as creating this radicalization or these enclaves of radicalization. It's so odd to me that they're going after YouTube when really you cannot cheat long-form video content. It is the truest form of content in new media. It's kind of like stand-up is the closest thing to purity in traditional media outside of a film or television. Like stand-up, you're either funny or you're not. YouTube, either people want to watch the video or they don't. It's not like Facebook, it's not like Twitter, it's not like Instagram with just a bunch of fitness models' butts. YouTube is great. YouTube is where people get information, actually engage in long-form content, and that's the one that they want to tar and feather and shut down. And that's why it's so odd and concerning to me. And I think if you go through your own sort of mental inventory, take your inventory right now kind of mentally and go, what do I do on YouTube? None of you guys are getting clickbaited on YouTube on a regular basis, I guarantee you. That's not how YouTube works. But that's the argument that big media is using to try and shut down voices they disagree with. They want to say that this right here is either hateful, bigoted, incendiary, or clickbait. It's none of those things. So watch the content for yourself.
But what questions most concern you as it relates to big tech hate speech in the current state of the First Amendment? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. And remember, next Monday we will be releasing the full, more traditional Change My Mind on the topic of hate speech, which holds more than a few surprises.
I would never encourage... No, I'm not scared of milkshakes. I think somebody who throws a milkshake is a pussy.
As a transgender woman that's a man, I'm a transgender woman that's a man as well. Did you see the new interview with Sundar Pichai and that space alien person where they admit they're censoring everybody? Did you see that?
What the hell are you talking about?
I have joined Obama and Hillary, and I want him silenced.